wanted to talk a little bit about how I see the rewiring of the data science and ML teams. I'm using data, ML, data engineering, all of that interchangeably here because one of the things that I'm doing at Tata Digital is kind of at least the journey for how we are reimagining, if I had to do this from scratch, 0 to 1, how we would have done it, and how there is an opportunity to do that. And for people that may not know what Tata Digital is a holding company that operates Big Basket, 1MG, Click, Chroma, and Tata Neu, and a bunch of offline businesses and B2B businesses. For example, Tata Digital issued more credit cards last year than Axis Bank. Tata Digital is a top 3 insurance player outside of LIC. So there's a large financial services footprint as well. But anyway, so that said, with that background, what I'm going to talk about is how, at least, I am attempting a rewiring of what the DS and ML teams look like in the modern times. And largely, the views are my own and don't necessarily are reflected by my current or previous employers. So, maybe we'll start with what the state of the previous art is. I mean, no offense to anybody that is still practicing the previous art. I'm just using it for effect. How the DS and ML teams operated and continue to operate currently, and so on. And then we'll take a pivot to what at least I see as the state of the next art, and what the new stack looks like along 3 dimensions, right? People, tech, and process. And maybe we'll end with a few learnings and takeaways. So the state of the previous art is typically, if you're in a data science and ML team, the composition somewhat looks like this. There is a Swiss Army knife type of composition and skills. You have people that have skills at the one extreme, which is the almost like classical ML and statistics, econometrics people that do causal methods, forecasting, predictions, and all the way on the other end to machine learning and deep learning scientists, as well as in between, if you're in an operations or a fulfillment type company like Swiggy or Delivery, but you also have a lot of operations research, optimization related people that are doing inventory type problems, matching problems, and so on. One of the personas that was very much needed in the old world was the ML engineers, who kind of served as the glue code between the scientists and the deployment part. Right? You don't want to hire a PhD in statistics from ISI and ask them to do some deployment stuff. That's not a good use of their skill set, right? So that's exactly the persona that satisfied that. But one of the positives of this was that there was very clear separation of concerns between roles and responsibilities of what a science team does and what an engineering team did, right? So ML is usually a piece in the larger workflow or the product, and most engineering systems always have fallback when ML models fail. I mean, again, using this in the context of product companies in some of these areas. One more feature was also that typically all of AI was largely done by the DS and ML teams, right? Because while the generative AI's democratization has been explosive, it hasn't been easy to democratize the ML work with engineering teams, right? So the common issues include things like you don't know what the data, where the data sits, what does this data mean, who instrumented this, what is the deal here. And even though you have a lot of these API-ized classical and ML frameworks, it's still not super easy it's not the same level of democratization as what the generative AI ML APIs are, right? So you still need a lot of deeper understanding of algorithms and models, and especially if you get into statistics and econometrics, it's a different ballgame, and it's even harder to democratize, right? So that also means that a lot of the quote-unquote AI work was limited to product surfaces, right? So you couldn't necessarily get into all of these places where AI is now extremely applicable, but was not applicable as much in the previous world. Right? So this is kind of the features of the state of the previous art. I'll give you a quick example of, I think Goda talked about search and e-commerce search in the morning, but in the previous world, for example, if you take a typical search flow, that's the typical life of a search query. So you start with the query, then you have a module for query understanding, then you go into retrieval, which itself is a bunch of agglomeration of lexical retrieval, neural retrieval, category-specific recallers, whatever, right? And then there is a fusion and enrichment layer that puts it all together, followed by a couple of levels of re-ranking and ranking layers, right? So some of the folks who worked here on multi-objective optimization and things like that, you'll kind of recognize that bucket there, right? And then not to mention the behind-the-scenes kind of the things, which is a large amount of work that has to happen on the catalog side of things. Taxonomy mapping, attribute extraction, synonyms, whatever. Right? All of this was typically done by a DS and ML team in the past. But now there is one big block, something like that. Right? So this is a true story. As we were building up our new search stack, it's not an endorsement of Azure or anything, but Azure AI Search, for example, we were able to stand up a end-to-end, multi-BU, multilingual, multi-objective enabled search stack in about 2 to 3 sprints max with 2 engineers, right? A lot of these components are available out of the box, and most of them are Gen AI-led, right? So again, a true story here. When we were building this, one of the engineers came from Amazon. He was telling that, I mean, some of the people who worked in multi-objective optimization will chuckle at this, but they had checked all the boxes for objectives to optimize for. They're checked for CTR, they're checked for CVR, they're checked for, I don't know, something else. And then apparently, even after all of that, the variant was still showing a higher cost per delivery on the test side because they'd forgotten to check the box for ETA. So like, that's how reduced it has become, right? But if you have worked on multi-objective optimization, you knew how hard it was to do it in the pre-world, so to speak, right? So what does it mean for now along the people dimension? So I argue that now, if you were to build the data science or ML team today, so it would be a little bit of a bimodal team like this. So there is a smaller mode of deep technical experts, deep machine learning scientists at staff level maybe, and then there is a larger bucket of, for lack of a better word, I think Mohit does not like full stack, but AI engineers, I would say. So AI engineers that are forming your bulk of the DS team, so to speak, right? So I see a bunch of people who might be at the cusp of, let's say, senior level, staff level, and potentially managers. What does this, at least in my view, people have to migrate towards one of these modes over a period of time. And if you're entering I guess none of the folks here are entering the workforce now, but it's important to build depth in one of these directions. But this also means that there is a lot of blurring of the roles and responsibilities vis-a-vis engineering teams, right? And I believe that's OK because now all teams are essentially engineering teams. SDs are AI engineers. I think the onus is on leadership and potentially AI PMs to help disambiguate who does what. And it's OK for same person to be doing 2 different things at 2 different in situations. So okay, let's keep going. So where does where is the need for still a deep data scientist in this new world, right? I would argue that what made a great staff scientist is still where the need is for, right? So where the people are deep data scientists can bring value is primarily on problem definition, metric definitions, and setting the kind of the culture for data first thinking as opposed to model first thinking, right? And obviously the 3 and 4 are the additional responsibilities that a staff data scientist would likely need to pick up, which are likely around explainability, unit economics of doing something, and obviously to drive innovation. Arguably, many of the companies are already doing that. And in my view, there will be fewer of the staff scientists, and they'll have to go deeper and broader as we go forward, right? Going back to that search example, yes, arguably 90% of the stuff is already out of the box. But there was a paper recently where now instead of doing your learning to rank model doing something, you want to be able to add some bespoke stuff. Let's say I want to model NPS and detraction quality in addition to my usual search metrics in my search ranking, in my multi-objective ranking. Or I want to use an SLM that is fine-tuned for Indian food domain data for tail queries. So that's something that is doable or should be done or led by a deep data scientist in-house, right? So I guess this is the new persona. The AI engineers is your new junior DS, I would say. So it's like a combination of data scientists, SD persona, as well as machine learning engineers, and with some understanding of system side of things, right? So I've had people in the past who have reached out and said they don't like the softwareization of DS, so to speak. But I think unless you are in an academic setting or something, that's a new reality. The companies and hiring managers are looking for really T-shaped people, and writing has been on the wall for about more than 5-8 years now, right? But that said, this also opens up the surface area for DS teams to do more, right? So earlier, a lot of the surfaces that were our product surfaces, but now you can get into that go a little bit deeper on that marketing track. Earlier, you used to simply do some uplift modeling or MAB of offer testing or something, but you can do more. Or, for example, there's an entire startup doing the second bullet, which is instead of doing one, or at least a cohort-level landing pages for 5 or 6 or landing pages, now you can generate 10,000 landing pages. And that's doable at varying levels of combinations, right? So, so this is the other persona that I'm seeing that's become super critical, which is the AI PMs, formerly known as platform PMs, I guess, with the AI coating. But the reason the platform PMs are great AI PMs also because of that deep technical understanding. So I think Srikanth talked about the platforms that you guys are building. I'm guessing you guys also have platform PMs. So in my mind, the important thing for the product managers, AI PMs, is to do these two things. Because the bullet number 1 of identifying areas to productize and infuse AI into is table stakes. That's what a PM is expected to do. But that in the proliferation, given that we have such a large proliferation of tools and services, driving build versus buy decisions is like an extremely important thing for an AI PM to be able to help with. And the third bullet is also super helpful because the pace is so much. The AI PM is responsible or should be helpful in cutting out the clutter from what we should focus on versus what we should not, right? That's the people part. I just want to also maybe make it a little bit clearer on the separation of concerns or the example handshake points between an AI PM and a business PM, right? So everything in that purple box is what an AI PM would be building. This is an example from one of our financial services products suite. So the purple box is what the AI PM is working on or would work on. And all the integration points is where they interact with the business PM. And they come back again at the other end when the eval at scale is needed. That's not to say that the eval is not happening here, but the eval at scale, again, the AI PM is again involved. So let's keep going. I want to now switch to the second dimension, which is the technology part. I will stick to only the generative AI side of things for now. Because the ML platform part has been covered quite heavily, so I'll skip that part. So I would say if you're starting out now, I would build the ML DL platform distinctly from the GenAI platform, simply because the moving parts and the usage and the design patterns are different enough that you'll gain speed by kind of not trying to converge everything at t equals 0 at this point, right? So you can do that convergence down the line if you decide to do so. Again, so this is where do we use this, so to speak, right? I think the no-brainer use cases are, I'm sure people have talked about code generation, content generation, enrichment, and all of that, and embeddings in all kinds of applications. But I believe, at least in a large enterprise like ours, a very ripe area for generative AI is workflow automation, right? So anything that used to take a ton of people or extremely repetitive set of things to do before is something that we are kind of going after. And at the same time, I want to be kind of very careful about, or at least be OK with the fact that when it looks like agentic automation might look really, really kind of fancy on the paper, but when you peel the layers, it might turn out that you're largely RPA++, and you should be OK with that. And that's where you need to separate the concerns between where you would put the AI engineering team versus maybe some other team that does that, right? This is a classic canonical example that comes up, for example, on pricing automation. That should look very fancy and very doable with an LLM, but you'll never let an LLM set the price anyway, right? Most of your pricing is extremely deterministic. For this set of categories, you do this. You only stay this much or not this much from your competition, all of that. So and there is a bunch of ML also, right? So there is elasticities are modeled by some ML models and so on. So agent could at best help in some API calling, tool calling, and some generating explanations. But again, so that's being about realistic about where it's helpful versus where it's not helpful. So Shantanu talked about their in-house platform. So this is our thing that we are building as we speak. It's about, 70% there. So one of the vision that we started out with is because we're a large enterprise and there is a large set of teams that do what they do, it is extremely hard for a central data science team to be able to manning all of that. So we wanted to basically democratize the usage of generative AI and led applications everywhere, but at the same time provide enough tools and primitives for people to do so in a governed manner, right? So if you look at this, I mean, largely built on, if you think this might be similar to some LangChain Studio or any of your studio stuff that you've done, but this is built in-house simply because we found that this was, we needed a little bit more flexibility in doing that. So the design elements are very similar in the sense that everything is a workflow. So you can compose a workflow that is a mixture of other workflows, other agents, all of that, right? And people can register their agents on the platform. The only thing that we're super paranoid again here about, because we also have a large regulated business, is on the evals and guardrails. And this is not a problem that we have fully cracked yet, but at least it's a little bit more of a evals is a mix of human in the loop as well as automated evals, which is largely LLM as a judge at this point, right? So keep moving. This is a couple of examples, right? So what we wanted again here is to be able to have SDE2 plus a PM. Can they take something like this to production is the level of complexity that we were aiming for. So this is an example of for some marketing use case, people want to generate personalized video messages. So this requires you to do, let's say, some ByteDance latent sync model or something like that, plus a lip sync model, and they want to be able to mix them together, and they want to be able to generate videos at the end of it. Again, this can be composed as a workflow, and if any particular box is not available, then that could be a requirement that comes in for us to put it in. So all the usual stuff is already there, right? So if you want to build a RAG platform, the primitives are available. If you want to do text-to-speech, speech-to-text, video generators, all of the ones that we could think out of the box, think for beforehand, we've already built it in. But what it also helps us here is prevent the proliferation of point solutions. In the absence of this, people would just go out and buy a point solution of some random company, and then we would be kind of holding the data team, especially would be holding the bag on being able to kind of maintain that, pipelines, all of that, right? So this is another example, right? So some RAG-based chatbot for some use case. And again, so this is 4x faster because all the components are usable in this case. So I'll keep moving. So this is another favorite of mine, because if you think about any number of use cases that we have, some of the people might be chuckling here, because if you large number of use cases, anything from analysts doing something, auto RCAs, business and marketing people wanting to do some data analysis, all of that is pinned on some text-to-SQL and text-to-insights backbone. And that's, again, a tool that's built on the platform and exposed to other people for them to build other things on top of. So I'll just, maybe this is an actual real-life example, something that we shipped recently. So if you ever stayed in a Taj or a Ginger or a Vivanta hotel in the past and you did not receive your points, you would have sent some email, and this is where it would have come. And that was a legacy Microsoft Power Automate-based solution that orchestrated that emails between the hotel, yourself, customer service agent, and then made the determination that if you will get the points or not. So we've mapped that out. Everything is extremely similar except for this part, which is that, right? So that is the agentic one. Simply because of that, we're able to handle a lot more edge cases. So when somebody sends an email, they'll just say, I stayed at Land's End last weekend. So then I have to send the email back saying that, please tell me, is it Taj Land's End, Mumbai? And when did you mean by last weekend, the exact dates? They might send back. And then we'll ask them for a bill, and if they may not have the bill, then you trigger an email to the hotel, and then you do, the PDF comes back, and then you do an OCR mapping across various rate codes, and all of that, right? So all of that is much more smoothly handled in an agentic flow than having to pre-think of all of those things in a Power Automate, drag and drop, no-code solution. And that's, again, as a developer, it's much easier to do coding than using a quirky no-code platform. So which was another kind of a side benefit we found. So that is that. And then I'll quickly skip over to the process part, not to kind of like make this shorter or anything. So this part should be fairly obvious compared to the ML and DL of the past. Democratization of GenAI has been explosive. Everybody and everybody's cousin has something to do now with each of these APIs, and everybody is being pitched a lot of these solutions also. So one unique problem the data teams will struggle with is that everybody comes to the data team and asks them to evaluate this solution for me, and that's not feasible. And let's say an example might be there is a business finance recon problem or a cloud ops automation. How is a data scientist supposed to know what that tool needs to do or how it should be evaluated. Right? So one solution that we have come up with is to kind of prevent this automation or tool hell or a POC hell. A cross-functional eval council that is kind of from all of these major personas, not more than 5-6 people, they're able to pre-filter and set the bar for what we will evaluate on, right? So that any random tool that comes in, we'll have to go through a screening process of sorts. So the scope is obviously, is this the right thing to do for us right now, and get a cross-functional POV, and then do some decision framework. And the percentages could be different for different people, but that's roughly the dimensions on which we evaluate the POCs on, and then we make a decision to either move forward or not. Right? I'll just keep moving fast. So this is another, I don't know, data engineers in the room may chuckle at this. So this is how I feel about all of the stuff that we talked about is the palace on the top, but the people holding all of this up are your data engineers, and they're often the most stressed piece of the link in the ecosystem. And they're doing all of that, ingestion, compute, they are doing migrations for the 4th time, and they're doing contracts and all of that. It's amplified for us also because we collect data from about 14 different Tata brands. So each of them have 15 different POSs, which have not been upgraded in 30 years, and so on. So all of that keeps breaking and all kinds of stuff, and they're constantly firefighting. Now they have to do AI also, this team, right? So, and arguably, because while we spend a lot of time assembling top-tier talent for your ML team, this team usually is a mix of your old school SQL developers and new age cloud-based Spark developers. Now they have to do AI, right? So how do we, and a lot of the use case depends on them being able to do that, right? So this is something that I wanted to kind of fix, or at least take head on and figure out ways for them to unblock them, right? So there are three things that they do. I mean, training is a given, and the next thing they spend a lot of time on is pipelines and recon, and then the general operational and execution excellence, right? So the training that we do, I mean, I guess this could be, you guys could do this also, I'm sure. So contextualized training with an in-house data architect, but more importantly, flip the script. It's not about just classroom training, I tell you once a month and all of that, but you tell me back the next time onwards. And the second one is on pipelines. So largely around increasing the observability and RCA, anomaly detection, as well as RCA. So that loop, we wanted to put as much generative AI as possible and see how we can kind of shorten that and smoothen that. And this one is a little bit more, if again, data engineers would know that every day you get something new, and you're supposed to magically be able to solution that and provide a solution in maybe a very crunch time, right? So how do you enable you to do faster? And at the same time, you need to have extremely pristine documentation, code reviews, and the jobs have to be optimized to run with, so that your finance overlords are not unhappy, right? So how do we kind of impute AI in some of these is something that we've done. So if you were to look at this on the pipeline side of things, pipeline fails, somebody spends, I'm sure there is some basic automation, people, but still have to put a lot of time on it. But this is something that we're putting in now is around essentially an orchestrator, a controller, whatever you want to call it, that essentially kind of has these classes of experts that is able to identify what the failed job is due to or can be fixed with. Sometimes it just might be because your spot instances went away and you just have to rerun the job. Or sometimes it needed a very bespoke Spark expert to do something. And these experts are, by the way, these AI agents, right? And then they would result in each of these remedial actions that need to be taken as a result of it. So, so this is some goals that we've taken. I think we should be able to achieve most of it. But this is about, like, we're about halfway through there, at least on the agent building part. On the operation excellence, I think this should be fairly straightforward. I think when I show you the example in the next slide, it should become more clearer. So maybe let's go there. So largely what it means is when a data engineer gets a new requirement, the expectation is that you should be able to solution that, and solution has to be like thought through across 4 or 5 different dimensions and then make an informed choice, right? But how do you do that when you're also crunched for time? So if you take this example, what we've done or doing is essentially kind of going back and building a prompt bank so that helps you build your solutions quickly. So if, let's say, if I come back and tell you that I need a scalable PII decryption setup that can work across the Tata ecosystem, 15 brands or something, and this is my functional and non-functional requirements. And now somebody is like, how does a data engineer that is working on, let's say, big basket suddenly supposed to know how to do this at scale for every brand out there? So, what the prompt is essentially built, I mean, some of these prompts are several hundred pages long. So prompt can be, now, instead of you intuiting your way through how to solve the problem, so the prompt is giving you top 3 options that you can potentially look at. And in this case, it shows that you should probably go with that third option, and including the pros and cons of each. And then obviously this part is straightforward in the sense that once you've chosen your chosen solution approach, it can give you an architecture diagram, core components, and also an implementation path. I think that's it. So I'll just quickly end with some takeaways. I would say that there is no escaping the new regime, right? Embrace it. So I would say that the scopes of DSML teams became simultaneously wider and deeper. Focus on the data layer, because that's your throughput is going to be regulated by the data layer. Platformize your primitives as much as you can to reduce fragmentation. And again, on the automation part, I think is still, at least if you're in a large company or a large enterprise, that is going to be a very big area for you. But please fix your broken processes before you put AI into it, right? I mean, this is an actual example. There is no API to give me, let's say, refund status check, but we wanted to put agentic AI on it. So that's not going to work. Evals are going to be super important. This is the other one, again, especially from a data team's point of view. Data teams can't be the bottleneck for everything. It kind of is a two-way street. Educate, empower, but govern and observe. So otherwise, you'll be dealing with a lot of these bespoke solutions that somebody decided to put in. I guess pace is unforgiving, so please don't beat yourself up if you can't keep up, but that's normal, and FOMO is somewhat good. And this is something that I wanted to throw in because this is used as a badge of honor in many companies, my VP codes, my CTO codes, and all of that, but all of that is not helpful if they can't help you take the production path, make it easier and faster, right? So that's usually a kind of a big blocker in many of these cases, and you'll get bumped for, oh, I could do this over the hackathon or the weekend, why does it take 3 months to get into production? Because this, I think that's it. Yeah. Yeah.